Card games, Cardfight Vanguard has some winners and losers. Today, we're only going to be discussing the losers. What is up, card fighters, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. Today, I'll be discussing some of the disrespectful moments in Cardfight Vanguard history as we take a look back at a lot of the archetypes, clans, decks that lost out on some big opportunities to make a comeback. Now, before I go ahead and delve right into the topic of today's video, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Do not forget to hit that notification bell on my channel so you guys are up to date on all the new videos that are coming out. For this week, we have a bunch of new videos dropping, as well as my first ever reaction video on my channel to the Cardfight Vanguard Will Dress anime. Now, to clarify what I mean by losers of Vanguard history, so I'm talking about decks or clans or even nations at this point that are either failing, that didn't have a chance to succeed, that are incomplete, or have just gotten overall blatantly bad support through bad card design. So that's what I mean by disrespectful moments in Vanguard, as these are decks that used to be superior but are no longer superior because of just bad support, decks that didn't get the chance to be finished and see their full potential or be played through, decks that just were forgotten through obscurity through all the support released out in Vanguard. That is to clarify what I mean by some of the disrespectful moments in Vanguard's history, or decks that are unforgettable or just unplayable in general because of bad card design, lack of support, and with no chances of future support. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I don't see a point in making like a 5 or top 5, because at the end of the day, all these people they're in the worst of the worst. Now, to start off with V, a card that comes to mind right away is Bladewing Regi. Now, for those of you guys that do not know, Blade Wings back in the day when it was just G were actually a really powerful deck. This deck had a unique playstyle. It was an archetype that didn't need a lot of support for deck regulars, but it functioned very well with what little it had. We also had really good offensive strategies, defensive strategies, and you had an amazing G unit that was actually a really good recycler for Dark Irregulars. As one of their big issues is the fact that they soul charge so much that they might lose out on their triggers, this card gave you the opportunity to recycle some of those triggers back while still maintaining some offensive power, as well as going back to your defensive power when you back to your original grade 3, which was Bladewing Sullivan. That is their past. However, when we got the introduction to Bladewing Regi, we were hoping that there would be some synergy with this card and its previous support, as any sort of retrain for anything usually should be able to do something previous to what it did prior, so that it could synergize with its past support. That did not happen here. Bladewing Regi is a card, as you can see here, that has its own original and unique design, and while there's nothing wrong with that, the problem is that they put it on this card. This card that does nothing at all similar to what its predecessor did, and has no synergy with any support from its previous sets or even current sets. Hell, even the set that came out with Bladewing Regi didn't even give support so that it could use its playstyle properly, so you could actually make a fully functional deck for this card to operate with. Bladewing Regi is just bad card design on a card that used to be really popular. The ability of Soul Blasting 30 to get a 15 card bind zone and then unlock all these powerful skills isn't even worth it, as essentially you don't have the proper cards to get to this point fast enough, and B, the amount of support needed to do so just isn't there yet, even in current Dark Irregulars v Vanguard. And while I understand this is a protect clan and you're trying to play the longer games, so that this way you can do your strategies, doing this is just too much. A 30 card soul charge, and considering the fact that your deck at this point will be less than 15 cards, assuming that you're playing perfectly and you're not drawing cards at all, you're going to deck yourself out. The strategy is to essentially get to the last minute of the game, power this card up to max power, and then try to kill your opponent with this already extremely powerful skill, but that doesn't matter because at this point in the game, a winner or a loser should have already been decided. Bladewing Regi is a complete failure at this point, and the V Premium deck has seen no tournament play and probably ever will unless it gets some extremely amazing support come next year. Moving on to another card of this set, I'm just going to go ahead and say her name, Sword Magician Sarah. The original Sword Magician Sarah did something very similar to drive checking grade 3s and then calling cards out from your soul to rear guard, but this deck is completely reliant on you playing grade 3s, but you're playing a lot of grade 3s in a clan that doesn't have the biggest card pool of grade 3s for you to pull from that would even go with its skill. Well, we have cards like Miracle Pop Ava, Kamikaze Chimera, and the Cannon grade 3 that lets you get power from soul. Those cards are good, but you need more variety in Sarah, so that this way you could cover up all the flaws the deck has, and unfortunately we just don't have that support for Pale Moon. Sarah as a card design does nothing for Pale Moon. It doesn't help them out. It doesn't improve any of the other previous decks that Pale Moon already had to make it even better. And the fact that Pale Moon doesn't have the best generic card pool in the sense either means that Sarah was doomed to fail from the beginning. And while unlike Regi, she's not unplayable, she's definitely a loser compared to her other cards released in the same set as her. For the next loser of the set, and while I wouldn't call them the biggest one on here, and I'd say that they probably have the one for the most hope of redemption, I'm going to talk about Blue Wings. The reason why it's called Blue Wings are even on this list is for the simple fact that Blue Wings, in my opinion, feel forgotten. Like, I understand they work with Revan and potentially Valios here and there, and maybe Thavis, and while they have some synergy because they have a big enough card pool for you to use all of them, the fact that they're still missing the one key piece to make the deck viable again, or to make it a deck at all, makes me feel really sad. I wish I could see this archetype at its full power. You know, they just need a main grade 3, something that can probably recycle heal triggers, so that this way you have the opportunity of activating their skills at their full power. Putting a defensive marker for an offensive archetype was also very interesting as well. I do feel like Blue Wings were sort of a testing ground for future front trigger support such as God Hand or Ancient Dragons, and while they're not front trigger reliant, the fact that they are a deck, one of the first decks that actually care about what trigger you reveal for their skills, means that they were a setup for the future archetypes to come out such as God Hand or True Ancient Dragons to succeed. Moving on to my next deck, I'm going to be talking about V Beast Deities. Now, V Beast Deities is interesting because I don't feel as though V Beast Deities, what they do currently in V Nova Grapplers, is good at all. And I'm even going to go as far as to say that I actually do think that previous Beast Deity support was better than modern Beast Deity support. Now hold on, before you make your comment, let me explain. Previous Beast Deity support was very fast. The deck was very fast. It just wanted you to restand your Beast Deities. You got multiple attacks off, and you got to do different things depending on what it was that you attacked with and when you attacked with it, and depending on how many attacks it did. For example, Beast Deity Brainy Papio in its V version gave you the deck on hit pressure. Hatred Chaos and Desert Gator gave the deck extra power. Beast Deity Ethics Buster and its other 3 variations, even the reverse and Ultimate Beast Deity Ethics Buster, those cards were very simple. They just wanted you to drive check Beast Deities, stand them back up, and you got to gain effects based off of how many you stood, such as Golden Anglet or Riot Horn, who one stands itself back up when you have something in the same column, and one gets power every time it stands. Very simple, love that, very simple. Modern Beast Deities have this new playstyle of attacking the player during the main phase before you go into your battle phase. This way you can use other skills from your hand to restand your units and gain effects based off the number of times those units stood. 2 completely different playstyles. I'm okay with that. However, Beast Deities and their main support feels like they're trying to shy away from just keeping it simple. When I look at these Beast Deity cards, it looks like they added one extra step to these cards to make them more complex when that wasn't needed. The beauty of Beast Deities back in the day was the fact that it was a very simple archetype, and what you want to do with the deck was very simple. It wasn't complex, it was fast, it was strong, and while it did have the simple issue of needing pieces, that's something that you could have easily fixed with modern Beast Deity support to make the deck better. Nova Grappler as a whole, I could essentially put on this list, same thing as Mega Colony, same thing as Royal Paladin, and while I do feel like all 3 of those clans have not reached their full potential and never will, I will say that Beast Deities, specifically Nova Grappler on this list, got hit the hardest. So moving out of the V era, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Vanguard history and talk about a few decks that notably in my mind to this day still mess with me and how unfinished or disrespected that they were. And the biggest one that comes up on this list is Sanctuary of Light. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Sanctuary of Light, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know, but Sanctuary of Light was a Royal Paladin ride chain that was introduced during the Limit Break era of Vanguard. Their mechanic was very simple. They wanted you to ride up, call out multiple Sanctuary of Light cards, use those effects to gain more power based on the number of Sanctuary Lights you had. They even had a Sanctuary of Light promo card that actually gave another grade 3 to the deck to improve its arsenal. Now, this deck was looking very promising as it was very simple, it was a ride chain, so it was very consistent, and it also had promo pieces to make it better. The fact that this deck was also a limit break deck means that you did have the late game playstyle to keep up with the other cards, and you were a ride chain, so you had the consistency buff, meaning that this deck had basically a good startup to become stronger. Sanctuary of Light, and the only reason why it's on this list, did not receive any support after its first introduction. And while I'm not okay with that, I would have been okay with it if they left it alone. However, they did something very disrespectful to mess with those Sanctuary Light players. Come 2 to 3 years later, Sanctuary of Light gets a sneak peek to one card they're going to get for the Moonlit Dragonfang set, which is going to introduce Royal Paladin support as well. Here we're thinking, okay, we're going to get a generic Sanctuary of Light Stride. Celestial's already gotten this, so did Seal Dragons, and we'll probably get 1 to 2 more cards to the deck. Problem solved. Sanctuary of Light players such as myself were very excited to see that we were going to get 1 card, and then when the rest of the set got dropped, we probably get 1 to 2 more cards, even a Stride to make it better. Let's be generous here. Sanctuary of Light gets all of its support revealed, and we get a generic critical trigger. The disrespect is there. Instead of just leaving well enough alone, just letting Sanctuary Light players fade into obscurity, they decide to mess with us by giving us a generic critical trigger that doesn't even benefit the deck because it doesn't have an effect. It's just a generic 5k trigger that doesn't add to the deck's arsenal at all, because you're not going to call a Sanctuary of Light trigger that does nothing to the rearguard circle to power up your cards. Unlike other archetypes such as Alfred or Jewel Knights or even Blasters that got trigger effects in the form of criticals, we get a generic critical trigger that does nothing for the archetype at all. Very disrespectful in my opinion, as the hope that the opportunity that this deck is going to have a chance to come back and shine its full power became non-existent, while other old archetypes such as Alfred, Sanctuary of Light, Jewel Knights got a lot of support during this time period. For my next archetype I'm going to talk about, I'm going to summarize this one very quickly because I already talked about it in a previous video. It is Nightmare Lands. Nightmare Lands are still getting support during the V era of Vanguard, but it's very disappointing to me that Bushiroad gave Dark Irregulars actually unique playstyle through the form of Nightmare Lands, which was getting soul and then retiring your rear guards and gaining effects based off when those rear guards are retired off the number of Nightmare Lands you had in soul with different names, was pretty interesting. It required you to play different Nightmare Land cards, and you expected those cards to do different things, and you had an offensive and defensive skill in the form of a clan that mainly is very offensive, but its game plan is so straightforward that having something unique that you decide to turn off because a lot of people weren't giving it a try was very disappointing. And I pretty much figured this was going to happen. Hearttrue did come out as a common card, and so did the rest of her Nightmare Land support. But the fact that Nightmare Lands have been one in the beginning of Cardfight Vanguard's history from Season 1 till V Premium to this day, it is very sad to see an actually unique playstyle never be fully explored in a clan that is so straightforward with what it wants to do that you let something good go to waste. And to summarize this video guys off, those are the top 5 decks, clans, nations, archetypes in my head that are being very disrespected or have been disrespected through the legacy of Vanguard. I mentioned decks that will never see the light of play, they will never top a tournament, and they will never reach their full potential. There are some honorable mentions here. I could talk about Royal Paladin, how Royal Paladin V hasn't seen anything amazing since Jewel Knights, and everything else is mediocre. Nova Grappler's lack of success, except for the fact that they have unique playstyles actually involved into them, but improper support to make it better. Mega Colony and that entire mess of a clan with its 3 different gimmicks that are fully under-supported, and all the other limit break decks that will never see full potential, sub-archetypes that will never see full potential, and non-existent ban lists for formats that could have seen so much more variety in their playstyles. That is it for today's video guys. Thank you so much for staying tuned through the entirety of this video. If you guys enjoy content like this, please let me know down in the comment section below. It really does help me as the creator know what it is that you guys want to discuss so that we can start a discussion in Vanguard. I think that these discussions are very important to talk about things that only groups of people talk about and bring it out to the entire community, so that this way we can let our creators or developers know what it is that as a community we want for the future of Cardfight Vanguard. Now, without further ado, you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and take off. Peace.